We got some unfortunate news for Nvidia stock and AMD stock investors, as there were reports that Alphabet and Meta are in discussions for Meta to purchase billions of dollars of Alphabet's custom chips in a competitive increase compared to Nvidia and AMD. And we're seeing AMD shares down almost 8% on the back of this news, and Nvidia stock down almost 5% on the back of this news. So let me share with you the details of that announcement and what it could mean for Nvidia stock and AMD stock. And I'll update you on my buy, hold, or sell ratings on Nvidia and AMD, and if I'm making any changes based on this news that was announced this morning. So Nvidia stock fell on reports that the AI chip maker could soon see greater competition from its own customer, Google, which is one of its largest customers, as is Meta Platforms. The information reported on Monday that Google is in talks with Meta for the Facebook parent to spend billions of dollars to use its AI chips in data centers in 2027. That would represent a big change in Google's chip business, which sees the tech giant rent access to its chips, which it calls TPUs, to developers through the Google Cloud. But in this deal, the chips are confined to Google's own data centers. They're not sold externally in most cases. But in this deal with Meta, the report is that Meta will be purchasing these chips rather than renting them out from Google. And that's an interesting change in dynamic as well, in addition to the fact that Meta is considering spending billions of dollars on these TPUs instead of going with something from Nvidia or AMD, which are known to be the number one and number two players in this category, with Nvidia boasting roughly 90% market share in this industry. Now, I've been talking about this trend that will likely increase for some time now, and the primary reason why I've been forecasting this will happen is because of what I mentioned earlier, with Nvidia boasting roughly 90% market share in this industry. The buyers, which include Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, are uncomfortable with Nvidia boasting such large market share. That gives Nvidia too much negotiating power. That allows Nvidia to charge higher prices and negotiate terms that are very attractive for Nvidia. As you can see, Nvidia in its most recently reported quarter generated gross profit margins approaching 75%. That's almost unheard of for a company that's selling hardware or physical products and not software. And so I've been talking about how these hyperscalers are going to develop their own chips internally. They're also going to give AMD a lot of runway to try and catch up to Nvidia. They're also going to try Intel and give them a chance at gaining market share because they are uncomfortable with Nvidia boasting such large market share. So I was expecting this to continue and to persist. Now, Nvidia stock is down 4.5%. AMD stock is down more than 8% following this news. And I've had different opinions of Nvidia and AMD recently. If you recall, I last updated my ratings for Nvidia, which I reiterated it as one of the top 5 stocks to buy. But AMD, following its quarterly earnings release, I downgraded the stock to a hold. I've recently downgraded the stock to a hold. I started the year rating AMD as one of the best stocks to buy. But ever since the stock price soared in the first, I want to say 7 or 8 months in the year, I downgraded the stock because of valuation concerns. And you can see, even after the 7.75%, 7 and 1/3% decline right now, the market price for AMD is $199, and my intrinsic value calculation for Nvidia, for AMD, I should say, is 193. So it looks fairly valued. Applying a margin of safety, the stock looks fairly valued now after the 7% decline. Prior to that decline, the stock was looking slightly overvalued, and that's partly the reason why I downgraded. Now I'm looking at it on my proprietary DCF basis, but I came to the same conclusion when I looked at it on a forward PE basis or forward price to OCF or forward EV to EBITDA. Regardless of the market multiple I used, the stock also looked slightly overvalued, especially when I compared with Nvidia, which boasts a lower market multiple compared to AMD and is clearly the better company compared to AMD on several fronts. And let me share with you my calculation for Nvidia. The intrinsic value per share, which I recently upgraded following Nvidia's earnings results. I increased the intrinsic value per share because the expectations, my estimates for free cash flow from 2027 onward increased by several billion due to the company's better than expected revenue and profit for the current quarter and forecast for the upcoming quarter, but also because of the management forecast for gross profit margins remaining around the mid 70% range for the upcoming fiscal year, which is better than I expected given the increase in cost, the increase in trade barriers, and the change in supply chain, onshoring more of the supply chain, which of course increases cost. And despite all that, the management team reiterated their forecast for gross margins to remain in the mid 70%. That was very bullish, and that incorporated into my free cash flow estimates. My intrinsic value per share increased from around $201 up to $214. And if you look at the market price today, following the 4.5% decline at 174, even if I apply my 5 to 10% margin of safety, Nvidia stock looks undervalued based on my proprietary DCF. And if you look at the forward PE multiple or forward price to OCF at around 30 or low 30s, the stock looks undervalued based on those market multiples as well. So it's two different stories here with Nvidia and AMD following this price decrease. I will be reiterating my rating for Nvidia as one of the best stocks you can buy right now. And I will also be reiterating my hold rating for AMD because this wasn't enough of a price decline to justify an upgrade back to a buy for AMD following this news. By the way, this spreadsheet you're looking at is my buy, hold, or sell spreadsheet. I make this available for channel members at the investor tier or above. And with that investor tier membership, not only do you get this spreadsheet with the buy, hold, and sell ratings, but you also get this spreadsheet that contains all of the discounted cash flow valuations I've calculated, and I've done so for over 100 companies here. And you can see this list. There's a discounted cash flow, intrinsic value, fair value calculation for all these companies, which I update regularly. And you get all that with the channel membership at the investor tier or above.